Low light B-roll. You would not believe how many questions I get asked about this. So the biggest issue that people have when they're shooting low-light B-roll with the M50 is that the ISO is not very good. Now, I know you guys have been asking a lot how I get clean footage at night, and so today I wanted to share with you the tips and the tricks that I have for getting clean B-roll at night. Now, I've already done a video about how to vlog at night using the kit lens, but today I'm actually going to be using the 22mm lens for my vlog shots and the 50mm lens for most of my B-roll shots. The 22mm is used in some of them. First of all, let me just make very clear that this is about low light video, not no light video. You have to have light in order to expose images. And when you have a camera like the M50 that doesn't have particularly good low light performance, you need to shoot in areas with light. Don't go into the middle of the field in Kansas on a cloudy day and think that you're going to get usable results no matter what you do with the M50. So the first setting that we're going to set up is your ISO. Now, this is the biggest mistake that I see people making when using cameras that aren't as good in low light, like the M50. They boost their ISO up way too much. Now, this is a shot at f3.5, 24 frames a second, shutter speed 1/50th, at ISO 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, 12,800, and 25,600. And you will see pretty much past ISO 3200, it's completely unusable. You can get away with using ISO 3200 if you denoise, and ISO 1600 looks pretty clean. So I would advise first off not going above ISO 1600, or else you're going to have a lot of noise, especially in your shadows. Look at the shadows. They are much worse than your highlights or your midtones. If you want to avoid noise in the shadows, try and keep your ISO at maximum 1600 or 3200 if you're going to denoise in post. Now, of course, most times when you're in low light environments, you're not going to be able to get bright enough, well exposed images when you have your ISO at 1600. I mean, if you try to keep it at 3.5, you're going to have a problem. You're not going to have well exposed images. And that's where wide aperture or fast lenses come into play. A fast lens lets in so much more light. If you compare this shot at f3.5 to the same shot, changing none of the other settings, at f1.2, technically 1.8 with the speed booster, which makes it close to 1.2, you can see night and day difference. Literally, it's almost like night and day difference in the footage. It is just, you cannot get good exposure in environments like that when you're shooting at f3.5. You have to get faster glass. Now, when you start your search for fast glass, you're gonna find out really quickly that fast wide aperture lenses are really expensive. You're literally paying for the amount of light that comes into your camera. But there are some cheap options. The nifty 50 is only about $150. And if you pair that with the Viltrox speed booster, you get effectively a 35mm f1.2 equivalent for the EOS M body. Now, of course, that would be equivalent to about a 50mm 1.8 on a full frame, but you're getting close to a full frame field of view, which makes it wider, makes it more usable, especially for doing handheld shots. Tighter lenses, as we all know, are a lot harder to get handheld video with. Wide is so much better for that. And then you have this lens, which is a 22mm f2. This is like a great lens for the EOS M platform. It's sharp, it's fast, and you can get good results. As you can see, I'm getting pretty good exposure on my face, even though I don't have a particularly bright environment because I'm at f2. I mean, if I switched right now to f3.5, this is what it would be like if I was on the kit lens, but simply But because this lens goes all the way up to f2, you have a big difference in how well this lens works for low light video. So if you're just getting into video with the M50, I would look into the EFM 22mm f2 and the EF 50mm f1.8 with the speed booster, which will give you a good little kit for doing nighttime and low light B-roll. Now, most of the time I'm going to advise you to put your shutter speed at double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 60 frames a second, you want your shutter speed at 125. But I figured out that you can kind of fudge that if you don't have too much movement. Now, the reason that we double our shutter speed is because we want good motion blur. But I figured out that if you don't have too much motion in the shot, if it's like a slow circling shot or something like that, you can actually bump down your shutter speed to say 1/60th, don't go below that, it looks funky, but you can bump it down to 1/60th and still get some good shots. That's something that I would advise as long as you don't have movement shots. But if you have movement shots like this one, you definitely want to put your shutter speed where it's supposed to be. If you have people in your shots, cars, anything like that, if you don't have the motion blur, it's not going to look very cinematic. That's like a little hack that you can do if you don't have too much movement to get an extra stop of light into your camera. Now, another thing that you can do when you're shooting B-roll is actually silhouette your subject. You don't have to have great exposure on what you're shooting as long as you're silhouetting it. And that's where having a fast, wide aperture that gives you super shallow depth of field really comes in handy, because even a small light, when you blur it out, becomes much bigger and is much better for silhouetting subjects. So if you're having trouble getting exposure on your subject, then try and silhouette it with a shallow depth of field. We're trying to draw attention to the subjects of our films, and so we don't always have to have proper exposure in order to do that. People do it all the time, and it looks great when you have like a sunset with a silhouette of a person. It looks great. That is something that we can do that looks actually quite cinematic, and looks a lot better if you shoot something like with a light behind it, as opposed to just trying to shoot something in the shadows. It just doesn't look good. But when you can get that light behind it, or get that light shining through it, it'll draw your audience's attention where you want it to go. And that's pretty much the purpose of the visuals of filmmaking, is drawing your audience's attention. So those are the tips that I use when I'm shooting B-roll at night. Now, I'm sure that there's plenty of tips that I'm not even thinking of, because I don't do a lot of low light video. I mean, believe it or not, this on YouTube is pretty much all I do. I don't actually have a career in video production. I've pretty much learned and done all of my video stuff on YouTube. And so if you see a video where I'm shooting at low light, you know basically what my low light filmmaking is. I don't like to do it. It's not as convenient. I like to be at home with my family at night, but I know people are always asking me how I get clean video at night. And so I wanted to give the tips that I use. Again, I cannot tell you every generic thing, everything that works. I can tell you what works for me, and hopefully those tips will help you make your films better. I hope you enjoyed this video. If it was helpful, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video. I need a better wide-angle vlogging lens for doing video at night. So if you guys have any suggestions, please let me know down in the comment section.